Oh, that's not a good intro? Let's do a better intro.
Of what?
For the show.
Oh, you mean like
intro. The pre-stuff that you're
pre-stuff.
never here for.
But I've been here for lately.
Whoops. Oh, I thought that might be help, but it's not. It's just a reminder that I'm doing a podcast.
Oh, that's good. It's good that your phone...
You should get to that.
It's good that your phone reminds you of that.
Yep.
Oh, I'm doing a podcast. Because, I mean, it's only been like
2 weeks.
2+ years that we've been doing this thing.
Yeah. Rich was late today. He needed a reminder.
When does he not?
Walking until building.
It's Rich.
All right, we ready to go? Now we got something.
Now
right?
we got some material, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Guys, we don't have anything for the material. Oh, let's make jokes about Rich. Problem solved. And welcome to another episode of Even More Mashed Up,
Woohoo.
a pop culture podcast brought to you by Misericordia University, featuring two professors. Oh, it's doing so good.
What? Featuring?
Featuring two
Featuring.
professors. Featuring two professors talking about all things pop culture, sometimes coherently. I am Patrick.
And I am Allan. I'm glad that you did that because what can I do to mess that up?
Well, you know what?
Today we're going to talk about?
You made me do two openings today. I
that's
only
true.
had one in me.
You asked to do the opening.
Fair point, too. We're going to talk about Glow, the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling.
Correctamundo.
Not the 80s wrestling program, but the Netflix show about the 80s.
Yes.
Wrestling program. So I thought the best way to get ready for this show would for me to go onto the interwebs and take the quiz, which Glow character am I?
Why didn't you tell me to do that? I would have done that.
I wanted to surprise you. So here's what I did. I took it 4 times because it turns out different quizzes gave me different answers. So I kept going until I got
Can I guess which one you are?
Yes, yeah. That's what I want you guys to do. But you have to get the one that I got twice. So it should be very easy to guess which character I am because I got 3 different characters, which makes me question the validity of these quizzes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Were you...
And then you have to tell me why.
Why?
And Rich, you know the show, right?
I'm looking at the Glow characters right now.
Okay, good. So you can pretend.
Were you Ruth Wilder?
I was not Ruth Wilder.
Yeah.
Why would you think I would be Zoya the Destroyer?
Well, no, because she is the second Bill behind Liberty Bell on the show. And I felt like that sort of mirrored our dynamic.
So you think you're Liberty Bell? Thank you.
Comparable to Liberty
Let's
Bell.
just keep moving. Rich, what do you think? It turns out Zoya the Destroyer / Ruth, incorrect.
Okay.
I did not get Ruth in any of the iterations of the quiz I took.
None. Okay.
Rich.
I'm looking up the people.
Oh, for God's sake.
Patrick, take another guess.
Yeah. Carmen?
I did get Carmen via BuzzFeed. Now, why do you think Carmen? Also, Machu Picchu.
I would say of all the characters,
Yes.
she seems the closest to you in terms of like pacifism. Like she's not as violent as the others.
Okay. I appreciate that.
I could see element of. I mean, obviously she's the wrestler, but
right.
But she seems to be the closest to you in terms of ethos.
Okay. What BuzzFeed said was that I don't like to be the center of attention. BuzzFeed was pretty good. I don't like to be the center of attention, but that doesn't mean I don't want to experience life. I have a heart of gold. It shows in everything I do. I only got that once.
Those were not my reasons.
Yes. Okay. So, Rich, what do you think? You still haven't gotten who I got, though.
I know.
Well, didn't you?
Well, no, I got one.
Yeah, but the one I got twice.
Not the double that you
Not
count as
the
the
double.
actual.
The double is the one that is
Right,
me.
but it's like Battleship. I hit your small ship.
There you go.
Now
Rich,
I got
hit a
the
ship?
big carrier to hit.
What do you got, Rich?
I'm going to go with Gail Rankin, Sheila the She-Wolf.
No, I did not get the She-Wolf at all.
Okay.
Patrick. Not sure how this is working, so you might want to just guess quicker.
Yeah, okay.
This is not a big
Well, I didn't say, were you Liberty Bell?
I was not Liberty Bell.
Okay.
No, Rich.
You said no to Machu Picchu already.
I said yes
No,
to
you
Machu
said yes
Picchu,
to-
Oh, that was. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you
was
for bringing
Carmen.
up the show.
Black Magic.
Yes. I got
Wait, did you get Black Magic or Junk Chain?
both. I got
Okay.
Cherry, Junk Chain / Black Magic Bang. Because I am, of course, as follows, according to Zimbio: athletic, experience, and a real leader. You're Black Magic, Voodoo Queen, and Master of the Dark Arts. All right, but neither one of you have gotten the winner. So you got a small ship. Rich got a small
Is
ship.
it Sam? Did you get Sam?
I did not get Sam.
Okay.
Rich.
Wow.
Hint, it was a wrestler.
Okay.
Oh, okay. It's like,
Goes in Bash.
Okay.
Tammy the Welfare Queen?
No, I did
Okay.
not get the welfare queen, who I want to talk about in some detail later.
Yeah,
today,
we probably
but
should.
Not now.
Okay. Was it Fortune Cookie?
No, it's not fortune cookie.
Okay. Because you know.
Because I do Asian American studies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
that might be something.
Rich?
Who do we have left? Botanica?
Britannica. Rich
Oh.
wins.
You got Britannica?
Yes, on both Pop Buzz and Quiz Lady.
And this was based on.
Okay, so Pop Buzz says, I'm Britannica. I am sweet, badass, and in all caps, a literal genius. Quiz Lady
That's why
says...
I
will say-
Oh, Quiz Lady had no description.
I will say you are perhaps as much a genius as Britannica.
Wow. Are you making fun of her intelligence, sir?
No, I'm using her to make fun of yours, in case that wasn't clear.
Which is predicated on her lack of.
Yes.
Okay, just want to be clear.
Yeah.
But this is the closest we're ever going to get to talk about wrestling on the show, right? I always
Oh.
tell you, Patrick, I want to do a show on 80s wrestling, and
And
you
we
always
are.
say,
What do I say?
absolutely not.
Yeah, no.
Will not happen.
Why do you want to do a show on 80s wrestling?
Just cuz? Like, I could talk about the Iron Sheik for an hour, and
Yeah,
it would be fascinating.
I had. There were
Nobody wants to
exactly.
hear that.
There
You
were
would load
2
up the boot of
years
that toe?
when
Yeah.
I watched wrestling semi-regularly.
Yeah?
98 to 2000.
That's Stone Cold Steve Austin?
Yes.
Man,
That was when
guy.
I was in Arkansas. Getting my master's, I would watch.
I make no comment.
I would
about
watch
Arkansas,
WWE,
'cause
but
we could have
that is the
listeners in
only
Arkansas.
era of wrestling that I have watched.
All right. So here's one of the things I really loved that I know you want to talk about too is I really loved all the 80s touches
Oh yeah.
in Glow. The music is
Oh my god, the music.
excellent. Like it's
The fact that they opened both seasons with "Scandals the Warrior,"
yes.
I love that song.
Who doesn't love that
That's
song?
almost up there with Aha's "Take on Me" in terms of like 80 songs that I love.
Really?
Like, if-
I would not have guessed the Warrior.
Oh, that
was
song got me into Scandal big time. Like,
Rival.
I bought that album. I got
You
their
got
early
into
albums.
Scandal
Yeah, I was big
big
into
time?
Scandal.
Wow. So you were the guy.
I really liked War. Yeah, War. I loved Warrior.
I
the
love that-
song, the video.
Oh, the video is great.
Yeah.
The song was great, but I never listened to another Scandal
But yeah,
song in
and
my life.
I cannot imagine a better song for Glow than
Right.
Scandals the Warrior.
But also, like, kind of peppered throughout the show, the music's just really good. I
It
think.
is. The only one I didn't care for was in season 2. I think they opened early on with a Billy Joel song. That one I did not.
It's been a while since yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're all perfect.
That one I did not feel great.
But to me, the music they picked is very emblematically 80s music.
Oh yeah, well, because they had Hall & Oates on there.
yeah,
They did "You Make My Dreams."
they should.
made me very happy.
Like any show doing 80s music should
"Separate
have
Ways"
Hall &
by
Oates.
Journey.
It's a great song.
So good.
Yeah.
Possibly the least objectionable song by Starship. Nothing's gonna stop us now.
No, yeah, it's a good.
Maybe Sarah's up there, but I'm like, it's not "We Built the City," which is
We
awful.
built it. No, come on, they built it on rock and roll, baby.
Yeah. So, but yeah, oh yeah, 80s music.
By the way, I'm not sure you can really build a city on rock and roll.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
seems
Has anyone
an
really
unstable-
tried?
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, no, the
Starship
music is
did.
fantastic. Yeah, I love the 80s music. Great, love it.
Way better than Stranger Things, by the way. Like Stranger Things, especially season 1, tried to be like arty 80s music.
Well,
you know,
this
it was
is-
like
this is one of the things
cool
that I
80s
really-
music. And by the way, there is no cool 80s music. There's the kicker.
No, there absolutely
on.
is. It's a different kind of cool.
It's
That's-
not cool.
Yeah, it's not
That's
cool,
what you
but
tell
it's
yourself
cool.
to feel better, but
Exactly.
sure.
It's one of the things that struck me watching Glow.
Yeah.
Was immediately thinking about it in relationship to Stranger Things
Me
and
too.
kind of representation of the 80s. And
Yeah.
one of the things that struck me was that, and I think we talked about this when we did Stranger
Yeah.
Things, was that it's a very nostalgic, kind of glossed over 80s. Like the only monsters in Stranger Things are the monsters.
Yeah.
Glow, I thought, particularly in season 2,
Yeah.
dealt with the 80s much less through kind of a veil of nostalgia. That
Yeah.
they dealt with that, particularly in season 2, there were so many ways that, and again, not preachy like we talked about in the Doctor Who episode, where you could see that what they were talking about in the 80s is very much about today, like when Ruth gets sort of sexually harassed by the producer.
Right. I want to come back to that too because I think there's
Like
there's a
I found
lot
Glow,
to
like kind of
talk
thinking about
with that.
Glow and Stranger Things in terms of their representation of the 80s.
Yeah.
I thought Glow's was a much more realistic, much less nostalgic version of the 80s.
And yet, when we get to music, I think Glow is a subject matter. Fits the music that I associate with the 80s much better than Stranger Things does.
I
I
would
know
s-
I know that horror films were big.
I would say
80s.
that the music that Glow has when I
Yeah.
think of the 80s
Yeah.
is the music I like about the 80s. Stranger Things, I think their music choices tend to be the ones that I don't care for as much.
I think they want to be like hipster 80s music. Not that there was such a term back, but like music that was cooler.
Well, they're
Whereas
trying-
not
I
like
think
the
they're-
stuff that you listened to in the 80s, which was
Right.
popular. I think
But again,
season 2 of Stranger Things took a more popular turn
it does.
in terms of the music.
But I also think that in some ways, there's two kinds of like 80s popular for me.
Yeah.
Like there's the Aha, and it's like, Take
Yeah.
on Me and Warrior were #1 songs on the top 40.
Right.
But then there's the Kenny Loggins and other
Right.
things
Yeah.
that the more kind of saccharine popular.
Whoa, time out. You're trying to draw.
I am drawing
I can see
distinctions.
what you're trying to do as a Hall & Oates guy. You're
I'm
trying to
drawing
say they
very
weren't
fine
Kenny
distinctions.
Rogers.
I said Kenny Loggins.
Oh.
But
Well,
Kenny Rogers
Kenny
would be there
Rogers
as
would
well.
also be a guy. Yeah. Okay, I hear what you're saying, but I think Stranger Things went for even like they were looking for like more undergroundy kind of stuff.
Yeah, I
in
think they're
season
in
one.
some ways I think they're trying too hard, but I think their representation of the 80s is
Yeah.
a much more sanitized version of the 80s.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
even if
because
those
in a
kind
lot
of
of ways
more
the 80s get divorced from the show.
Yeah.
Like
the
like-
reality of the 80s, yes.
Yeah. And season 2 they try to pull it in with like campaign signs in the yards and whatnot.
Yeah,
But
but it's still pretty.
but
I mean, I
to-
like Stranger
yeah.
Things, but watching Glow,
Yes.
Glow just the way they deal with gender, with race, with the AIDS epidemic, things
Right,
like
but-
that were much
but
more.
to me, it's the topic too. It's
Oh,
the
yeah.
Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling was such an 80s undertaking.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't fit the 70s and it doesn't fit the 90s. Like it could only have come in the 1980s, and that
Yeah.
plastic kind of music,
Mm-hmm.
popular, but to me I'd always felt plastic a little bit, to me really fits the show.
Yeah.
Like the music supports the show better, and that they shoot the opening video thing at the mall.
Oh, that was fantastic.
It's also like the most 80s thing ever.
The other
right?
thing
is
that
to
I
go
love,
to the mall and shoot
I'm watching
yourself
that
a little
episode. I'm like,
video.
they're at the mall in their costumes,
Yeah.
and nobody is looking at them. I'm like,
It's the 80s, baby.
I'm like,
You know,
like they're there in complete full-on costume,
Yep.
and nobody blinks an eye at them in the mall. I'm like, yeah, that's not terribly wrong.
And there were two other moments that spoke to me that just like, as you're talking about, like really captured the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
When, spoiler alert, Liberty Bell comes out of the audience to challenge Zoya the Destroyer when
Oh,
they're
yeah.
shooting the pilot,
Yes.
it's like the most brilliantly 80s thing I've ever seen. I got teary-eyed. It was like Rocky showing down Ivan Drago.
Mm. No, it sort of is a
in
version of
Rock.
that.
It is, right? And it's just, to me, it was this brilliant 80s moment. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to know what the 80s felt like, that is a moment
ways,
that
I think
really captures it
For me, I really liked I liked season 2 much better than season 1.
Season 2 raised questions for me, so I want to talk about that.
I really liked season 2. Season 1, the characters, they had moments,
Right.
but there were a lot of times where they never seemed to verge beyond caricatures.
It took them a while.
And
but
season 2, I felt
I
like the
want to
characters
argue
became
against
much more
that a
real.
little bit too. But one other 80s thing, real quickly, that Bash has a robot butler full of drugs.
That might be the moment where it reached caricature the most. I'm like, okay, this
but
is
to
not
me,
a
like
realistic
actually, what
depiction.
my notes say is maybe the most 80s thing ever. Not in terms of like people actually had
Right, no,
robots,
but in terms
with
of capturing
drugs.
the essence
But
of the 80s.
ethos of the
Yes,
80s,
I 100%
is
agree.
that the robot from Rocky,
Yeah.
right, in Rocky 4, he gives his kid that little robot that goes around, and it looks just like Bash's robot, and
Yeah.
of course it's loaded with cocaine because that's the 80s. Is it a caricature? Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a caricature that speaks to a truth
Yeah.
about the 80s. To me,
I'll give you that. Yeah, no, I mean it is a moment of like that probably never happened in the 80s.
Right.
And yet we wouldn't be surprised if it did.
right? Exactly, right. That it is in my
so it
mind,
does kind of- but there-
if
yeah.
not my lived experience.
Yeah.
exactly. Like that robot ought to be the mascot for the 80s.
In some ways, yes.
You know, like Shaggy would be the 70s mascot.
Yeah.
In a robot full of drugs.
Row.
No, it'd be a Scooby bag. Or whatever, the bag
You mean
of
a
Scooby
Scooby
snacks.
snack?
Well, the box. of 'em.
Scooby,
Would you like a Scooby bag?
a Scooby bag, which is in Rich's mind a box.
Yeah.
A bag of boxes.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And inside the boxes are more bags.
Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
back
so,
to the show.
One of the things you raised was like the way they're kind of addressing issues today through the 80s. Mm-hmm. Right? Was that the point you were making?
Yeah. Well, the way in which that there were moments that the show, like you recognize, maybe this is the way I would phrase it. You recognize in its depiction of the 1980s, particularly in terms of gender.
Yeah.
You see the kind of society that produced a Kavanaugh.
Yes.
You look at that and the kind of society that women then and now are still having to tolerate.
Yeah.
Are becoming less tolerating of.
Yes.
And I think that was something that really struck me. But without ever doing kind of the preachy, this is what we're doing.
Right. Right.
But there were a lot of moments where I was like, particularly like the moment where Ruth sort of gets sexually harassed by the producer.
Yeah.
Like that's just that kind of thing was just normal.
Right.
In the 80s.
Right.
And is no longer being accepted as normal.
Right. So one of the things that struck me is clear the juxtaposition. They're trying to juxtapose the 80s show, which was grounded as deeply as you could ground anything in sexism and patriarchy and misogyny. Like it was the apex of all.
Don't forget racism.
Well, but we're talking about gender right now. Like I'd like to do racism next if we could. Yeah. But like all the worst of that sort of anti-female, anti-woman, comes in this show. But they want to juxtapose this god-awful show with the show they're making today that works, or at least wants to work, the empowerment angle. Because they want to show you, like, Ruth getting sexually harassed. Right. And that's like, it's an excruciating scene because you see it coming the whole time.
You do. It's the other thing
she doesn't.
She doesn't.
Right?
And the other thing, too,
but as a viewer, you see it coming.
Alison Brie acted it amazingly because until she walked out, I did not know what she was going to do. And I was in kind of this moment of horror.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, God, is this going to go?
Because the truth of the matter is.
Going to. Because more than likely, that's what would have.
80s culture ends up with her getting raped,
probably
right?
Not what would have happened.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But the show throughout, like, in her walking out, but also, like, Ruth sees more power for her in the Glow show than for women elsewhere in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah.
Right? She can't get a job anywhere else. And not only does she get a job, but she becomes really sort of the creative engine of the show.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not just Ruth. All of the women are taking charge of their lives in different ways, right? So Machu Picchu wants to wrestle, even though her dad says girls don't do that.
Right, and
so,
brothers.
Right, so she's asserting herself. Liberty Bell has to deal with her wayward husband, who's like a classic 80s guy.
Oh, yeah.
In all the wrong ways, like in all the bad ways. Welfare Queen and Junk Chain, even they create like their own match versus the Ku Klux Klan on their own.
Yeah, that was a little
We'll come back to that one. Debbie later notes directly that wrestling has let her take control of her body again. Like directly she says,
oh yeah, like
wrestling,
after her childbirth,
is my way of controlling my body. It's not my son who controls me anymore. It's not my husband who controls me anymore. So there's empowerment. But I wonder if we have to be careful about mistaking today's politics for yesterday's realities. You're reading the show rightly, right? I don't think they're trying to say this is the reality of the 80s in every way.
Right.
But we can celebrate the empowerment too much, like we're attacking it today, and not appreciate maybe what these women went through entirely.
Well, the creators, the creators of the show, kind of, I saw the article where they talked about they saw the show, or they see the show as exploring the aftermath of the women's movement of the 1970s,
right?
And kind of asking whether things got better in the wake of it, and very much they want to. They talk about what they want to do in the show is maintain a tension between the idea of Glow as empowering for women, but also exploitative of women. And I think they do a better job of that in season 2 than season 1.
Because Vicky and I had a long conversation about it, right? Because if the show is about empowerment, and you can find some reviews of the show that are very negative, complaining about like faux empowerment, like what seems like empowerment but really isn't. Like, let's assume that these women, Ruth and Carmen and all the rest of them, actually found some empowerment through Glow. How much is really accomplished if these 12 women find empowering jobs, but jobs that produce a show that does the opposite for women in the real world, right? That Ruth can kind of say to herself, I have empowerment. Like I'm a creative force and I've got an acting gig. Like I've got a job. I'm making it on my own. But she's doing it in a way that perpetuates images and attitudes about women that makes it worse for everybody else living in American society.
Well, but I think it very much speaks to kind of a way in which women were and still are trapped.
Right.
That there's a way, I mean, again, that whatever empowerment they're finding, it's a personal form of empowerment.
Right.
It's not a more global, it's not an empowerment of their gender. It's that these individual women are finding and I don't even know if empowerment is quite the right word, but an identity or...
Well, with wrestling, like, the power just seems like the natural way of phrasing it.
Well, and that's how most things talk about it.
But, I mean, Ruth does seem to have more agency or more control.
Yeah, I think I might like agency better than...
However you want to phrase it, right?
But I mean, it is...
But that it
is kind of this interesting way, and again, I think it in its own way, I think it captures sort of the box that women were and are kind of stuck in.
And reminding us that box doesn't mean that all the women in it are a monolith.
Right.
That they all imagine the same solutions or that they all face the same problems, right, inside that box.
Yeah.
And so, to me, it was a question to ask, but I think we should ask the question about the show, too, because I think the show is trying to show.
When you say the show, do you mean Netflix or Glow?
Netflix.
Okay.
Yeah, Netflix is saying, Debbie says, wrestling has let me take control of my body again. Like, she says that directly.
Right.
In season 2, I think the show does, like, I think there are a couple pretty substantial missteps. If that's the message they're trying to send, you know, that Debbie now has control of her body. One scene, she realizes her marriage is done for, like it's over. She has this kind of breakdown in her bedroom.
Yes.
And she does it in her underwear. Right? Like, that they have to have her literally just in bra and panties. Like, she can't be fully clothed to have this. And then there's later in the season, there's the episode with her showering.
The shower scene, yeah.
Right? Which, again, both of those scenes, I think, can be read as somewhat gratuitous. In a show that's purporting to make a point about Debbie, I now control my body.
Yeah.
The actress playing Debbie.
Well, and a show that, by and large, has not been gratuitous in that way.
Right.
Because I would say, the shower scene in season 2...
The scene where she's in her underwear
Yeah.
and the scene where she's taking the shower are both, I think, like, they really jump out at you because they're so unlike so much of what the show has done.
Right.
And it seems to directly contradict the point we're just talking about.
Yeah.
Like, if this is really a show that's, like, kind of arguing that Debbie is controlling her body, well, Netflix still controls her body.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the director, like the people making this still control her body, and I don't see how you can argue that those scenes are made for anything but the male gaze.
Yeah. No, I don't...
Right?
Well,
they are made for men to look at.
Well, I would add the... in season 1, we get a sex scene between Ruth and Debbie's husband.
Yeah.
We get a sex scene between Debbie and the wrestler guy that she hooks up with very briefly.
Yeah.
And I would add, those are added to the list of sort of gratuitous kind of moments.
Yeah.
In a show that by and large isn't as gratuitous as you might expect it to be based on the premise.
Given what it is, right? They've actually created, like, the female characters seem fairly human. Like, they're not these sort of idealized bodies in lots of ways, I think, in the show. And yet, like, there's still these moments that suggest, like, the problems that we've been talking about, the problems from the 80s, the problems that continue today, are clearly still here, even in well-intended material that's trying to address sexism.
I mean, you maybe could have... I think part of it is, I think maybe you could read the shower scene, particularly sort of Bash's walking in and being sort of befuddled.
Yeah.
That maybe there is a way that they were going for that he's entering into kind of a female space and is out of place. But the way they film it does objectify her.
I appreciate that might have been the intent.
Yeah, I don't think they executed it.
But watching it, I don't see how you can see it as anything but sort of classic 80s titillation.
Yeah,
like that's the kind of scene you see in every 80s movie, right? Like it's always there. And so, to me, I wanted to kind of talk about what I feel like they're trying to do for these women, and for thus women in general, but the way in which the show still struggles to overcome those kinds of problems in American society.
Yeah. I mean, I agree.
Okay, how about race then?
Okay, how about race?
Oh, boy.
It does really good.
See, now, you don't like season 1 so much, but episode 3, season 1 is one of my favorites.
Which one was that?
It's the one where the show within a show find itself. Like, the women are there, but they...
Oh,
like,
right.
Like, how are we going to get people to watch it? What's going to make it interesting? Where they figure out the answer, of course, in American pop culture and entertainment is for the women to play really simple characters.
Right.
Grounded in really gross stereotypes.
Yep.
Right? Like
Beirut, fortune cookie,
Arab
junk
terrorist,
chain. Yeah.
deceitful Asian, a welfare queen, literally, junk chain, like all of them, they become stereotypes.
Yeah.
And that's when they get seen. That's when people want to pay attention to them. They don't want to know them as human beings. They want to know them as sexualized stereotypes. And to me, like, there's this real power here, like, because it's talking especially about, like, because it happens after we know they're real people. But we don't want to know them as real people.
See, part of it, I would say to some extent. I
Okay,
don't know
with
that
the
we
show-
know all of them as real people at that point. Like, I would say Ruth,
Maybe I'm reading back
Debbie,
a little bit. Yeah.
Carmen a little bit, but because that's my issue is that a lot beyond kind of the main characters.
Okay, but in
The other
rest
ones
of,
in season 1 don't really break out as much.
but over the course of the rest of the show, they become real people.
Oh yeah, in season
But known only as stereotypes, right?
Yes.
Real people known as stereotypes. And that's like the light bulb moment where you realize wrestling is, and this is why we should do a show on just wrestling at some point.
No, we shouldn't.
I'm not
Wrestling is
fighting, I'm just
exactly
confused. I
who
was not
we
aware
are.
you
This
were
is
that
our show
into-
on wrestling.
I was not aware you were that much into wrestling.
I'm not, but I'd love to do a show on wrestling. I think it would be fun. But wrestling is then and now exactly how we are as Americans. It's exactly how we see people. That's exactly what we want. We don't want to know real people. We don't want to take the time to understand the complexity of people's experiences who are unlike ours, because that we don't have the energy to empathize or the desire to empathize. What we want are really stock characters that will entertain us.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of
To me, it's just like, wow. Like, that I thought was a truth worth kind of thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the show on more of a narrative level or sort of on a meta level, that they start to challenge that, particularly in season 2.
Season 2 more
Particularly
directly.
with particularly like I think of Beirut
Yeah.
and how, you know, we really start to see in season 2 that she really chafes against portraying that stereotype. We learn, you know, about her having been in medical school.
Right.
We start to see her romance with Yolanda, which I really like the way they started that.
Yeah.
That we start to see the show kind of on a I guess on a meta level,
Right.
starting to question that in a way that clearly did not actually happen
Right.
in the reality the show is representing.
Right. Well, we don't know, like, I don't know, maybe you do, if Beirut in the 80s or whatever the character's name.
No, I don't know that
like,
any
if
of these
they
characters were
chafed
the
against it in the
I don't know
80s?
that any of these characters are actually glow characters.
But they all existed of that type. If it was a different name.
Yeah.
Like, they still had terrorists, right? They still had...
That I don't know.
Okay.
But little bit of research I didn't show a ton of parallels.
Yeah. Well,
in terms of,
Liberty
like,
Bell
direct-
has a clear parallel, and Zoya the Destroyer has a... Because Vicky and I watched the Glow documentary.
Yeah, see, I haven't watched the Glow documentary.
Which is totally worth watching at
Yeah.
some point. Like, it's a really eye-opening kind of experience, too. So...
But also part of me is I didn't want to know too much about the actual Glow.
Yeah.
Because you know how I am about shows that twist versions of history unrecognizably, like Frost Nixon.
When they changed one thing that gave us the historical truth that you
But
object to.
but I disagree.
All right. So anyway,
I don't want to get bogged down in
Yeah.
judging this
Okay.
show based on its representation of history.
But having said that, I really like what the show's trying to do there. That we don't want to see these women as individual women or human beings. We
Yeah.
want to see them as sexualized stereotypes. But how effective is this really as social commentary? Like, does it really work? So let's think about the welfare queen, for example.
Yeah.
She worries in both seasons about the character she portrays. So in
Yes.
season 1, like, Sam kind of dismisses her. He's like, no, we're slapping at Republicans, right?
Right.
Like we're mocking Republicans because the welfare queen was a real thing.
Oh, yeah.
In the 1980s. Not that I mean in real life, but it was a real idea.
It was a real idea that was purported by
Ronald Reagan,
yeah.
and the right wing in this country that we shouldn't have welfare because they were taking their welfare checks and buying fancy cars. They were driving Cadillac. I
Yep.
guess it's like a poor person having an iPhone today.
Yeah, well, what was
Would
it
be like
that I think they had like they always it comes up every once in a while that thing on Fox News of like here's what people are using their welfare checks to buy.
Did you
they
just call
buy
them Fox News?
I
kind of like.
they're buying microwaves. They're
Yeah.
buying TVs.
How dare
They're
they?
buying refrigerators. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's awful that they're going to preserve their food.
Yeah, terrible people.
Yeah,
and heat it up later.
yeah.
But the
How dare they?
the welfare. You should only buy enough food to eat it right now.
Yeah.
and then be done
Exactly.
with it.
Yeah, exactly.
like-
That's why everything's
So
canned.
They're buying mattresses.
right. But the welfare queen, to get back to Glow,
Right.
worries about it, especially how her Stanford attending son.
I really liked that episode.
I did and then I didn't. But so we could talk about that first.
Yeah.
Like so, her son actually finds out. Right, she goes to Stanford for Parents' Day or whatever.
Yeah.
and white folks recognize her.
Yep.
as the welfare queen, and he's really upset. And he goes and watches. To me, I really loved the episode until the ending, where I felt like it was a little too pat.
Yeah.
He gets upset. They have a talk about it. She drives him back to Stanford.
He drives.
That's
She's
right.
sleeping in the car.
And that's it. That's the end of it.
Well, I think it was meant to be because I think he says something about like stopping to get something to eat. I think there was meant to be a reconciliation sort of between
Right.
them.
No, I
which
think
which I can see is that it's
The
a little-
reconciliation feels pat and a little too easy to me.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I mean, part of it is that I just see it as a reconciliation between them,
Between a mother and a son.
between a mother and a son, and
Not a
not really
political-
having any more significance than that.
Okay. That he can live with it.
Yeah,
But to me, I'd
because
like
I think it parallels the moment earlier in the episode where like the white girl greets him by some other black kid's name.
Yeah.
And then they run into the black kid
Right.
who literally he's like 2
Right.
feet shorter.
Like nothing like him at all.
Nothing at all like and I liked the idea of
No,
them
no.
reconciling with each other.
Yeah.
Because they have sort of a shared experience.
Okay. But the show then kind of moves on beyond it. Like,
well,
and that's the problem. Like
I
it's-
could see that,
Like
yeah.
it's so contained in this episode, in a way.
It is,
And
but
I
I
understand that the show's not about her.
Yeah.
But it would be to me that's something that needs more attention and more time.
It could. I could also argue. What I would argue is
Also?
that, in terms of like dealing with the racial issues,
Rich, wake up.
I'm awake.
the best they could really do
Yeah.
is achieve some kind of reconciliation between the mother and son.
Because society.
Because anything beyond that is going to feel artificial and ridiculous.
That's fair. But even the reconciliation between them, I didn't quite feel it.
I was okay with it. I mean,
Okay,
I could see where it happened a bit fast.
I see where you're coming from too,
Oh.
but I just felt like to really make that point,
Yeah.
there needed to be a little bit more attention spent.
Oh, I would like to. I mean, my concern would be yes. So this was our one episode on welfare, queen, and race.
Right, and now we're gonna do-
we're not going to do it. We're never going to go back to it again.
In
Like we did our racial episode.
right, and kind of doing a parody of the 80s
Yeah.
or a critique of the 80s, it's become the 80s in a way.
Yeah.
In kind of a token approach to this.
Yeah,
Like-
I could see
Right,
that.
like, oh, now we've done race.
Yeah.
Now we're going to do homosexuality.
Yeah.
Now we're going to do, and in that way,
Yeah.
given the Doctor Who conversation we had, you have that kind of
Right.
It feels artificial.
Well, and I would say particularly if you think, I mean, in terms of the shows dealing with homosexuality, I mean that's been dealt particularly in terms of Bash. That's been much more of a slow burning storyline.
Yeah.
Whereas you're right, this was the race episode.
Right.
And so yeah, I can see kind of. I mean, I thought as the episode about race, I thought it did about as well as it could.
Okay, fair.
I see your critique in terms of like it's kind of their one-off, and we've done that, and now we're going to deal with other things.
We've done a segregated episode on
Yeah.
race, and now we'll move and do other things.
Yeah.
Although they do one in season 1 where Junk Chain and Welfare Queen take on the KKK.
Yes.
There's not much in that for me, but the director's commentary is golden.
Oh, so I haven't watched the director's commentary.
Oh no, I mean the guy who's the announcer.
Oh, the announcer. Was that Bash? Or was it a
Yeah,
different announcer at that point?
I don't remember who's doing it, but he says, "This is not for kids." Well, maybe you're never too young to learn about our country's history of racial injustice.
Yeah.
I don't think that probably showed up on like the Real Glow.
No,
Things are not going well for the white supremacists.
Yeah.
Funny, but I'm not sure it's getting us.
Yeah. Well, and that
Much.
again, that's my issue with season 1 in general is that there's a lot of stuff like that for me just kind of rang flat.
Yeah. Well,
more so than in season 2. It's kind of
it's
like
such
it's kind of like
ensemble.
with Riverdale in
Yeah.
that like season 1 Riverdale I wasn't really a big fan of, and then like the season 2 premiere had me all in
Yeah.
for reasons I can't explain, and then of course season 2 became kind of a hot mess.
Yeah. In season 3, ugh.
No.
Yeah.
But I will say that
But it's an ensemble, so it takes more time.
it is,
right,
but I
to
will say
develop-
Glow I think has made Glow for me season 2 maintained in the way that Riverdale did not.
Yeah, I thought I found season 2 a little more up and downish because there were the moments where I felt like if we're gonna make race an issue in the show, we ought to treat it with a little more care or a little more attention or time.
I can see that.
And I felt like the Debbie stuff in particular, the way in which she becomes objectified in a show that purports to show women not being, or finding ways around it. So to me, season 2 had some missteps.
Yeah. Well, and that's my concern for the show kind of going forward.
Yeah.
Is that the one of the producers is Genji Cohen, who's been behind Orange is the New Black. She was behind Weeds.
Boy, Orange is the New Black did not have legs.
Well,
Like,
and
it
that's my
really-
concern
it went off a cliff.
is that Genji Cohen like Weeds was really good for like the first 3 seasons,
Yeah.
and then they did kind of a really big change in premise.
Yeah.
And it kind of became very uneven at that
Yeah.
point. And my concern is that, particularly at the end of season 2, where they're now going to the Vegas show,
Right.
and the way in which the strip club guy that shows up in the next to last episode and then is kind of the solution to their problem in the last episode, I was like, well, that felt forced.
Yeah,
I
right.
feel like my concern is that Glow has already kind of hit the point where
I feel like
we're going into the slide.
Vicky and I both
I have
watching
these
it
fears.
felt like season 2 had moments of slippage already.
Yeah.
That
I felt it slipped towards. I felt good about season 2
Yeah.
right up until the last episode and a half. The marriage,
yeah.
the strip club guy becoming the moment he showed up, I'm like, well, he's clearly going to be the sponsor of the show going forward.
Vicky became skeptical of season 2 fairly early,
Hmm.
actually. For me, there were moments of skepticism, and I think you're right. Like the last couple episodes feel like, oh my God, we've got to get them to Vegas.
Yes, exactly.
And
Plot hammer.
yeah, and so I agree with you.
Yeah.
Alison Brie is brilliant. Like
She is.
anything she does, she's just so good at acting.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have some concerns about season 3.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe we'll come back to it at some point.
Yeah, the radical change, and I'm just like, this is a radical change in premise.
Yeah.
Shows by Cohen that do this, generally, that it just seems like it might be too far of a departure.
Yeah. No, I agree. And a final question, though, about the show is social critique.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody watch it as social critique? It goes back.
Yeah.
Have I talked to you about the argument Vicky and I had about The Wolf of Wall Street?
I think so, yeah.
Which is the Leo DiCaprio 80s Wall Street film, which shows you all the excesses of the 80s.
And it's meant to be a critique, but
All
all
the
it really,
sex and
but all it really
drugs.
kind of does is show the excess to be really
Right.
fantastic.
Scorsese clearly means for you to watch all of this excess and be like, it's supposed to
And
make
be
you sick,
horrified, yeah.
right? Like you're supposed to be horrified, and you're supposed to be sick to your stomach that you would treat women and people who aren't, heteronormative white
Right.
guys, so incredibly shabbily. And I'm like, this is a great critique of the 80s. And Vicky's like, no, it looks like a huge party.
Right.
Right? That a lot of people
Yeah.
go to the Wolf of Wall Street and they're like, man, I'm going to go.
Oh, there absolutely were
I'm
people,
going
I think.
to go to work on Wall Street.
That's
So
what I want to do, yeah.
I had this
Man, I missed
conversation
my
with my
chance.
students afterwards, and some of them said, look, I had roommates. None of them admitted themselves.
Right.
Maybe it was true of them too, but I had roommates, like conversation in the cafeteria, like, my God, like what a great life. Mm-hmm. And so it gets back to the point we were arguing with Rebecca on Doctor Who too. Like, how much can you trust the audience to read this as a critique
Right.
of race and gender in the 80s and now?
Right.
And how much is the audience watching it because there's naked women in showers?
Right.
What's your answer?
Yeah, no, I think
Yeah, no.
it's a concern. Yeah. I mean, I think that sums it up. I think, again, Glow is a show that's, again, as I mentioned with Doctor Who, it's trying to thread a needle.
Right.
That historically has been very difficult for
Agreed.
American pop culture to thread.
Yeah.
The examples of American pop culture that pull it off are much fewer than the ones that kind of, go off the cliff.
It's really hard to do.
It's really hard to do.
Well, and it's also like in Wolf of Wall Street, I don't think at any point it shows I don't know what the Cobra's character is even called, like the character's name, but like he never seems to suffer because of any of it.
Well, he gets caught in the end.
But does he?
But then at the end, he gets to give that speech, like the real guy.
So like he still,
gives this speech,
but
and
he still wins. So in the same
Right,
way of Glow and
exactly,
whatnot, you know,
yeah.
it's on one
'Cause didn't
hand
even,
it
like,
just
the-
shows it, but if it also
Yeah.
doesn't say it's bad,
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Didn't the
Yeah.
daughter of the guy that Wolf of Wall Street is based on, like, not like the film?
I don't remember. I
there was- I
don't
vaguely
know.
yeah,
seem to
no, the
recall that-
daughter was like,
The daughter
this
was like,
is-
"Whoa, no, my dad sucked. Like, what are you doing?"
Well, the thing is, the film shows him as a sucky guy.
Yeah.
Like he's a terrible
Right,
guy
but in a way,
in a
who
lot
cares?
of
He
ways,
wins.
but he wins.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
and that gets back
Even
to
when
Doctor
he
Who
loses,
because
he somehow wins.
Because
Well,
in America,
and-
all we care about is winning, right?
Well,
like
and
as
that-
long as you get elected president, or
Yeah.
you get out of jail and you get a movie made about you, or you're a
Yeah.
celebrity, nothing else matters.
Well, and I think probably in terms of going back to Glow, I think in terms of my biggest concern in that regard is Sam's character
yeah,
and kind of the way in which that he's clearly on a kind of redemptive arc, and I'm not sure he's a character that deserves redemption.
the show should not. And in fact, if you watch the Glow documentary,
Yeah.
that guy really doesn't want to come to the reunion they're putting together. Like
Yeah.
when they make the Netflix show, somebody's like, we should make a documentary, and they try to get all the women together for like a reunion, and he doesn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And the women talk about like the way he made fun of like their legs being too flabby, or like them not looking good enough, or they're not.
Yeah,
thin
I mean, that's
enough,
the
or they're
problem,
not
is that I
pretty
feel like-
yeah,
enough.
why would he want to be held accountable for that?
Yeah.
Well, of course not.
He
but the,
about- he
but
about-
the
That's
point
the
is,
issue
if we're gonna
is
if we're
I'd
gonna
like the
redeem
sh-
him,
I'd like
Yeah.
the show to
Yeah.
hold him more accountable.
it's Sam's
than he-
character
for his awfulness
Yeah.
than it does. Like, we see moments of awfulness,
right?
but he gets off the hook.
and Ruth always serves to redeem him in
Yes.
some way.
Well,
like
and
to-
the
to-
romance between the two is clearly meant to
Right.
redeem him.
to humanize. I think if the show really wants to make a social commentary, it can't redeem Sam.
Yeah.
like
No,
Sam
I agree.
Cannot be redeemed. Once you redeem him, like any social commentary you've tried to make in this thing,
Yeah.
it's already been undermined by the shower scene and the
Right.
bathroom
Well,
scene.
and the problem is
and the
that
sex
we're
scenes, right?
we're
Is that-
already by the end of season 2, we're well into the redemption of Sam. Like, the
Right.
choice to not redeem Sam has already been made, and they're redeeming him because he's like, oh, look, he's not the terrible parent.
Like,
It's the
he
mom.
could be hit by a bus in the next episode, and he'd still be
You know, like-
halfway redeemed or whatever.
So,
Right.
but
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
that's the
that's
problem
true.
is that Sam, like, there's moments where you see the awfulness of Sam,
right.
but they tend to get glossed over and
Right,
sort
because-
of redeemed
Because
from later.
guys are allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're still allowed to be a jerk and a terrible person, and a woman will redeem you. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's kind of like a woman's job is what
Yeah.
I still think the message girls are given today, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
your job is to find that terrible bad guy and redeem him.
Well, what was it? Ariana Grande, when her ex committed suicide,
Right.
there were all kinds of people that were like, why didn't she, do more for him?
Right.
He wrote a whole album about her. She should have appreciated that.
Yeah.
And I think she pushed back on it and basically said, my job is not to make him better.
Yeah.
Like, I tried for 2 years or what have you, and
Yeah.
and I was
And
done.
especially like when it's drugs and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like you can't make somebody better, as it turns
Yeah.
out. But there's still the expectation that women will and should, right? And if you don't want to, then you're some kind of ice princess.
Yeah,
or
well, and
whatever.
again, it does kind of gloss over a little bit because it lets Sam off the hook
Yeah.
for much of the same things that, say, the television executive that tries to proposition
Right.
Ruth
Right.
doesn't get off the hook for.
Right.
But
But he's just a stock passing character.
right, but the issue is that Sam is that same kind of guy,
Bingo.
and
Yeah.
they let him, and so that in terms of the show. Really, like I think of oh God, what was the movie we saw with the horse people?
Sorry to bother you.
Thank you. I couldn't remember
Yeah.
the title.
Oh my
Sorry to
God,
bother
such a-
you.
such a good
Like
movie.
that's not a film that let anybody off the hook. Like that is stark.
yeah. No.
The horse people?
Yeah, you
you've
just gotta watch it.
You've got to watch it.
Yeah,
But forget that he said horse people.
Yeah,
Okay.
But you,
Yeah, forget
as a
that.
calm guy, you have to watch. Sorry to bother you.
but yeah, but like
brilliant
that's a
film.
film. Like I would.
Right.
I wish Glow was more like that.
It's unflinching.
In its represent-
That movie
yes.
does not flinch. It's like The Wrestler, which is another movie that just like looks at the ugly truth and
Yes.
refuses to
and
stop
that's the
looking
and that's
at
the way
it.
to Glow. I think has already started to flinch a little bit in terms of Sam. Now Mark Maron
I agree.
plays him spectacularly.
Absolutely.
But they let him off the hook. They flinch a little bit.
Yeah.
In terms of, we want to show how bad things were for women in the 80s, but there's still going to be, the Sam that can be redeemed.
And he should be and was emblematic of all that was wrong.
Right.
So like once you redeem all that was wrong,
Well, and that's the
You know
problem.
what you
is
have?
They want him to be
You-
emblematic of all that was wrong,
Yeah.
but also want people to like him.
that
and those don't work
is
together.
Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
It's literally Kavanaugh to a T, right? Like we
Yeah.
want to say that kind of behavior is awful, but it's not.
Right.
It's unacceptable, but it's not.
But it's not.
But
Yeah.
it's not unacceptable.
Well, it's acceptable from everyone else, but not this person that we like.
Well, yeah, but that person being the man in this
Right.
situation,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Because like when Kavanaugh was testifying, like all the stuff that people were saying about partying in the 80s and everything rung so true.
Of course it did.
Like it's like, yeah, like I grew up in the 80s, like I know what the 80s looked like. The
Yeah.
one professor somewhere wrote, like if you didn't do this to women in the 80s, you're not a real man.
I saw. Yeah.
It's just like mind-boggling, but you know what the truth is? That's a lot of what the
That's a
80s
lot-
looked
yeah.
like. That's what women were subjected to
Yeah.
all the time. And
Yeah.
so if we're going to do it for Kavanaugh,
Yeah.
why wouldn't we do it for,
Well, and I
for
think we-
Sam and Glow, right?
and-
That's the process.
And not just say, 'cause I mean, they do try to do stuff in terms of like when Debbie becomes the producer and Sam and Bash
Yeah.
both not treating her equally,
Right.
but both Bash and Sam get redeemed.
Right.
In the sense of, clearly they've got the idea of Bash as sort of struggling with his sexual identity.
Yeah.
And ways in which that are clearly meant to redeem him. So like your two male leads
Right.
are ultimately both kind of redeemed.
Flawed, but in ways that you can see the redemption built into the flaw.
And they're the only men you see that aren't in some kind of passing role.
And isn't that what happened to like every guy that came out of the 80s?
Yeah.
Right? Is that it didn't matter
Yeah.
how you treated women.
Yeah.
Maybe it still doesn't matter.
Yeah, well,
how you treat women.
I think the Kavanaugh hearings kind of show pretty starkly that it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Watching sort of old white guys waggle their fingers
Yeah.
at women who are testifying is a stunning
Oh
commentary
no!
on
Or even
on-
just people saying they're like, yeah, no, I believe her, but we want him on the bench because we want to win.
right.
Like
Yeah.
again, it's that's
Or saying, I believe her, but it wasn't Kavanaugh.
yeah,
Like all of these things we do to distance ourselves from what we're really doing, which is redeeming
yeah,
Kavanaugh. We're
redeeming Kavanaughs. Yeah.
We're redeeming Sam. Like we're redeeming Sam's is what we're doing. And it's built. It feels baked into the show.
yeah.
Like there's never a moment I'm watching that show where I think Sam's not going to get redeemed.
No.
Right? Like it's baked in, and that
No,
is tragic. And if
Yeah.
it does that, whatever good it's done. It's like saying,
Yeah.
I believe that Ruth was assaulted, but I don't believe that Sam did it.
Yeah,
Like that's going to be the takeaway from the show, which means you're denying that Ruth was assaulted.
Yeah.
In any meaningful way,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
I think so. We both see real warning signs.
we do. Yeah.
Like-
well, and again, I think again
signs
the
of
show in
danger.
terms of that issue of female empowerment and representation of gender, like the show is a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Which I think, I mean, again, I think Genji Cohen in general, Orange is the New Black, Weeds, you can kind of see a track record
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
some of that, like meaning well, but the execution at times.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
Falling
could
flat.
undermine a series that had real potential.
Yeah. I
If
mean,
they
again,
don't-
and again,
if they don't get season 3 right.
it doesn't take away from particularly Allison Bree's
Agreed.
spectacular performance.
Yeah. She's unbelievably good.
There's just she's good in everything she does.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is again, it's kind of painted itself somewhat into a corner.
I'm afraid it has.
Particularly it sort of inherited a corner with the women in the show.
Right.
In terms of the limits, in terms of what they can do versus empowerment and exploitation. It's painted itself into a corner with Sam and
Yeah.
Bash and the other men.
Right.
In that it's kind of stuck with a mess of its own making, in that, Mark Maron is an incredibly charismatic actor.
Yeah.
He's perfect for this role.
Yep.
But because of the role, it's having to do something with gender in terms of masculinity.
And because he's a star.
That's problematic.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely agree.
Because
Absolutely
really,
agree.
when I think about it, like I thought about this, like really the only man who doesn't kind of suck is probably Russell, the camera guy.
Yeah.
The guy that used
camera guy.
the guy that used to film porn is one that actually has a somewhat enlightened view of women, as far as we can tell.
Yeah.
And yet we know that relationship is doomed
Yeah.
because you have to have Ruth and Sam.
If that, yeah. I mean,
But Russell's the only one that's a halfway decent. And maybe even more than halfway decent man on the show.
thus far.
Well, does he look that much better just because of everyone else he's compared to?
That helps.
It helps.
Yeah.
Well, because I thought for sure the moment like he and Ruth broke, when Ruth kind of broke things off with him, I was like, okay, Ruth is clearly going to want to get back together with him at some point. He's going to have slept with Brooklyn or someone else at that point.
Yeah.
Now, I was glad they didn't go that direction.
Yeah.
But that's the problem, is Russell's the only one who actually, I think, treats at least Ruth with some kind of respect.
Right. He's also the one we know the least about.
He's the one we know the least about.
He's the least developed.
Yeah, and we kind of know that his time on the show is limited.
One assumes.
You know, he's the one man not in really need of redemption.
Right.
But of course he's sidelined.
Yeah. Right. Because the good guy always is, right?
Yeah,
Because
so-
there's no drama or
Yeah.
interest in that. Well, that's depressing. But I do have a more optimistic point that we can start
feeling-
moving towards an ending on.
I'm feeling much worse about this show than I did when I walked in the door.
We talked
Yeah.
about pacifism on Doctor Who.
We did.
We can talk about veganism in Glow.
Okay.
No, we can't.
Yeah, we
Time's
can.
Up. Bye,
No.
everyone.
Kate Nash, who plays Britannica,
Yes.
also, fairly well-known singer, has gone vegan.
Oh, okay.
And has done it in part to prepare for the role on the show. But the article actually says, is giving these women a platform from which to speak.
Yeah.
And which I think is pretty awesome. So Nash said in an interview, quote, "When you're a woman, you have such a strange relationship with your body because especially when you're in the public eye, you're constantly being judged."
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so she is talking about veganism as a way of kind of being conscious of the power of decision in her life, of exploring her relationship with her own mental health. And so I thought, for all the problems with race and gender, veganism kind of, knocking it out of the park here.
Yeah.
But that's all I had on veganism.
Though that's not really in the show.
no,
at
it's
all.
not at all.
Yeah.
So maybe
So
not
I've got
redeeming
a
some-
couple of fair fouls that I'd like to run by you.
Okay, I have a couple, but I'm assuming we're getting near time, so you go.
So this is from Jen Chaney of Vulture.com on season 2.
Okay.
In a way, the first season of Glow was an origin story that explained how a group of
I saw
superheroes
this, yeah.
developed their costume alter egos and discovered their hidden powers, which makes Glow's follow-up season the equivalent of The Dark Knight or Spider-Man 2, a sequel that exceeds its predecessor in terms of depth of storytelling and sheer entertainment value. There's so much there for you to
Yes, it's the Dark Knight, of course, that throws me because it is a beautiful film, but a terrible film.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that the depth of storytelling, as we've talked about, is totally true of the second season. I think there are moments where people want it to be deeper than it is.
Okay.
The Welfare Queen, I'd like it to be deeper. I
Yeah.
feel like there's it's like a medium depth instead of something more serious. But I do think it's an ensemble, like we talked about earlier. They needed to spend a season assembling people,
Yes.
and getting to know them, so that we can now do things with them.
Yeah, I would. That's very much my sense of season 2.
Does
is
it
that,
exceed? I don't think season 2's better than season 1. I think I would rate them about equivalently. I think they have different kinds of problems, but that both are. I really enjoy them. I think they're fun to watch.
Yeah.
But they both have shortcomings.
I think for me, I would rate season 2 better than season 1.
Yeah.
But I would agree that I think your point about, for me, it's going from something that seemed very caricatured and surface level to something that's probably mid-deep, but not as deep as it could go.
In that way, there is a little more ambition, but it's also leading to the problems that
Yeah.
we're talking about. Critics agree with you, by the way. Numbers on Rotten Tomato, season 1, 95, season 2, 99.
Yeah. So I've got
Both
one
of
more.
which feel inflated to me.
Yeah.
It's like a 90, 92.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
is what I
think-
would give it.
And then this was something I found, Aisha Harris of Slate.com.
Yeah.
Talking about Genji Cohen, says, if you think this sounds a lot like Orange is the New Black, you are not wrong. Cohen's fingerprints are all over it. And there was this next part that I found really interesting.
Yeah, okay.
Once again, a classically attractive young white woman, talking about Bree's character,
Yeah.
is the viewer's Trojan horse, smuggling in a
Wow.
whole range of
Yeah.
different character studies and subplots.
Holy cow.
I found that
it's absolutely true.
And I found that
mean,
idea,
there's no
and I was trying to think of
doubt about
that idea of kind of the classically attractive young white woman being the means by which we meet diversity or inclusivity.
But it
that
in a
kind
way,
of Trojan horse idea.
it turns you into a voyeur. It's a kind of a voyeurism, right?
Yeah.
In a
Well, it made it
sense
kind of
that,
interesting, like, how
you're
much of a
safely-
motif is that actually in?
Yeah, I think that's
pop
actually
culture.
a brilliant
I
idea.
think a lot of times.
That's the thing, like,
But the way in which if you center yourself in Piper or you center yourself in Ruth,
See, I haven't watched Orange is the New Black, so I don't know
but
that. as
Piper
well.
would
I know
be,
Piper
would be
is the character, yeah.
the classically good-looking,
Yeah.
blonde, white.
Well, same thing with the
woman.
main Mary Louise Parker's character in Weeds.
Yeah,
That she's the main means by which we find that. But I'm
But-
also
but
wondering,
the- but
I'm not
does
sure
it
how much of it
distance-
is just a Cohen.
does
bit.
it distance you as like the white, let's say the white viewer? Does it provide you a kind of protection, like that you're with Ruth or you're
Well,
with
I would
Piper,
argue-
and thus you're not?
Well,
like,
see, I would argue in Weeds, it's a almost entirely white cast to begin with.
right, but in
So,
the
but I
other
think,
two,
the other two, I think
the,
it's different.
The casts are really like one of the great things about Orange is the New Black is that it had this incredibly diverse cast, like
Right.
an almost unheard of in
Yeah.
terms of diverse cast.
Yeah.
And the best part of the show to me was always the non-Piper stuff.
I've heard many people say something similar.
The individual backstories are way more interesting than what Piper's doing in the
Yeah,
present.
that's what
Almost,
I've heard a lot of that.
almost always. I'm not sure the same is true of Glow. I mean, Ruth is actually a fairly interesting character.
Yeah.
In her own right, but I'm interested in this idea, and then pushing it even further that it's a way of sampling, or like
Yeah,
thinking of
yeah.
like Bell Hooks,
Right.
that it's a way for white Americans to sort of consume the other,
Right.
but to do so with safety,
Right.
right? Because Ruth is going to be okay.
Well, but
at the end of
it's
this.
kind of this interesting, kind of a double-edged sword in the
Yeah.
sense that, in terms of describing it as a Trojan horse, on the one hand can be read as, is this a device by which the audience is tricked into identifying with
yeah.
others? But also it speaks to what you said, is it a safe distance by which to... I just found it a really interesting
Yeah.
idea, and in terms
It's-
of
it's really
a
fascinating.
motif in... Because Harris is clearly identifying it as a motif of Cohen's.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering how
question
much
is,
of it is
is
it a motif in
bigger?
pop culture.
That would be a great conference paper.
Yeah, that I just found really interesting.
sure.
I'm like, that's a really intriguing notion.
Yeah.
That I hadn't really thought of before.
Of all the fair and foul you ever brought, that's a really sharp idea.
yeah,
That's a
I really, when I
really-
read it, I was like, I
as
had
Rich
not.
drifts into
No, I'm just-
somnambulance, but like to
Yeah.
me, like that's a really interesting.
Yeah, no. When I read
idea.
that, I was like, wow, I had not thought of
and
that
so
with Ruth.
so
but it totally makes
she's
sense.
writing it as a way to trick people into empathizing with.
I'm not sure.
Diversity?
That's the other thing, is the way Harris phrases it. I'm not clear.
It doesn't sound like it's tricking. It sounds like it's just a.
It
cliche.
feels to me like she's actually trying to be critical of the show,
Yeah.
but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
And that's what I find really interesting about the device she's identified.
Well, because it could certainly cut both ways.
and that's the thing, yeah.
You could use it to lure people in and introduce them to diversity in a real human way.
Right.
But it would also be a
Which might be
consequence
in a
of
way
how
that
the diversity is
maybe
depicted in the
Whitaker's
show.
doctor is accomplishing.
Yeah, it could be the
Yeah.
same thing like with Sam. That.
But
like,
it's really
they're
kind of just
trying
kind of
to
that
show
idea
this
of-
idea,
Yeah.
and they just sort of fail at it.
It's
Yeah.
a question of what is, in terms of the Trojan horse, like what is the trick?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a really
Well,
interesting.
who's getting tricked?
and who's getting tricked? Yeah. So
Yeah.
just something I found really interesting.
I think that's a fascinating idea.
Yeah.
Fascinating idea.
And so maybe that's a good idea to end on.
We rarely end on the fascinating. We
No.
usually just deteriorate into
Well,
just general conversation.
I like to think that I end on fascinating things, and then someone steps all over them.
I like to think the humor of the show, though, Rich, and maybe you want to chime in on this, is that you always think you've got a brilliant ending, and then I dilute it by just kind of talking over it, and then you get really upset, which makes me laugh.
But by the mere fact that you say you dilute it means that my ending was something better before you intervened.
Except the dilution in
This
this
is
case
so
is
painful to
actually
listen to.
a paradox. The dilution makes it funnier.
Yeah. No. Until next time.
No, yeah, no.
Yeah, no.
You win. You win this argument.
Oh, look at that. We're out of time.